Dice Wars Heroes of Polyhedra. This is a fantasy war game in which you will have a number of players controlling fantasy armies and pretty much going around and trying to take control of cities and trying to destroy each other. The game reminds me, in a very general sense, of Warrior Kings by Columbia War Games. Actually, it's precisely because they look similar that I became curious about Dice Wars. The game uses some very unusual game pieces that look like dice, that are used like dice once per game, which is you roll them at the beginning of the game, and the symbol that it shows on the top of the game piece represents a military unit that piece will be for the rest of the game. So you roll these game pieces once per game, and so you have random composition of the different armies. And once you have those armies, you set them up in a corner area of the board, and then you go around and you try to destroy other players and or to take control of cities. So, without further ado, let me show you how Heroes of Polyhedra, Dice Wars Heroes of Polyhedra works. The game is played on this modular variable map that you assemble by using these double-sided tiles, and so it's pretty much random generation of terrain, which is a good idea in theory, but does not always work for reasons that I hope I'll be able to convey to you. Now, in the game you will have different fantasy armies. They start from the 4 corner tiles. Unless you have 3 players, then you only use 3 armies, otherwise 4 players, an army per player per corner, and 2 players, then each player controls 2 armies that start in opposite corners. And during the game, armies will maneuver around trying to destroy each other, because victory conditions is based either on control of cities or on elimination of enemy units. So destroying enemy units is good. However, again, the random generation of the terrain will make it so that certain objectives will be much easier to achieve than others. For example, here, let's have a look at the terrain. Mountains are impassable and they block line of sight. Water is impassable but does not block line of sight, and you can shoot over it with ranged units. Forests that you see here are incredibly powerful pieces of terrain, because when you're in there you cannot be attacked by ranged units. And so what happens is that, suppose that I am the army sitting here, what I'm going to do first thing, I'm going to place a couple of ranged units in that forest there, because those are incredibly powerful defenders. Now the enemy is coming from that direction. They're gonna take some punishment from my range units as they approach, because the melee units cannot do anything, and the range units also cannot do anything because they cannot attack my people there. So actually, if I am there and I'm not a complete doofus, what I'm gonna do is actually to kind of like neglect this area and try to attack in that direction. So the terrain will pretty much create bottlenecks and highways, and so that not all the maps is likely to be used, and definitely there are going to be certain objectives that will appear pretty obvious from the beginning. Armies are stored in bags such as this one, and they contain all that you need to create your army. Also, armies are randomly generated, so what you can do, which is pretty cool, you dump the components of the bag on the board, and pretty much you have your army. Now, several of these polyhedra, 2d6s and 80-20, are used as actual dice. They will generate random numerical results. The other polyhedra are not really dice, because once you roll them, you are not going to change the orientation anymore. The symbol that is on top will simply represent the kind of unit that polyhedron represents and acts as. So this unit will always be an acolyte, for example, and this here will always be a cavalier, and so on and so forth. Now, So after you generate your random army, you will simply place it in your starting tile. That is, again, your starting kingdom, so to speak. Also, as you may see, each polyhedron has a little triangle there that represents orientation. So you need to make sure that that is always facing a side, particularly important because, for example, the opponents get a bonus if they're attacking you directly from your rear. But what do those symbols on the polyhedra represent? Well, they may represent a lot of different units. And to keep track of that, each player will need to have a spread of cards, such as this one. So these cards will act as play rates of what the different symbols mean and what the corresponding units can do. So, for example, moving a little closer and trying to avoid the glare, which is considerable. We know from the play rate that the symbol here represents a barbarian. And so now we know that the unit represented by that polyhedron has a attack of 3, a defense of 2, a range of attack of 1, and a movement of 5. Those are what those numbers are for. Then each unit also has a special ability, so it's like a permanent ability plus a special action that can be activated during their turn. And you have units that are represented on six-sided dice. And so there's 6 of them. Oh, what a surprise. And these are the weakest units. They only have 1 health point. A single hit will destroy them. Then you have units represented on the 8-sided dice. And there is, I think you guessed, 8 of them. They're a little stronger because they can take 2 hits. And so, well, 1 hit before they die, the second kills them. And so, for example, we know that the 8-sided die with the book represents the wizard that has an attack of 1 and so on and so forth, and different abilities there. So there's a lot of units that you need to keep track of. Now, you may not have all of these units in your army, but you still need to know what they do because your opponents might. And so you want to know what happens if a paladin tries to attack a ranger, if there is a disadvantage with the acolyte trying to target the witch, and so on and so forth. Also, each player has a hero represented by the 12-sided die, and again you have therefore a number of different heroes that are the strongest units in the game. They take 3. They have 3 health points, as you can see there in the top right corner. Different symbols, different abilities, particularly powerful abilities, very often abilities that allow them to interact with their own units, with their own soldiers. The game pretty much is based on the idea that players will alternate taking turns. During your turn, you will activate 2 of your units, and you can activate them for movement, and then for an action, or an action and movement, or some movement, one action, and then some more movement. And you continue like this, alternating 2 units at a time, attacking, activating effects, until either you retain control of a captured city for 3 turns, or you kill the enemy hero, or you kill everybody else in an enemy army, but the hero. Speaking about the activation, there's also an unusual idea here, which is that you can activate a unit before you complete activation of your first unit. So, for example, I can choose to move this unit, and I still have some movement points. I attack with that unit. Then I move with this unit, I activate an ability, maybe an ability allow me to do something with that unit, and then I complete movement, and then with this one, and then I complete movement with that one. Great flexibility yet, but also that means you need to remember what units did and can still do. They can be a little messy that way. And you can see it as an opportunity, you can see it as confusing, it is completely up to you. As for combat, which is really the heart of the game, because you're going around trying to kill units,
It's pretty simple. When you're attacking, you need to attack an enemy within range of your attack. Remember this number here, range of your attack and line of sight. Then you roll 2d6s and you add your attacking bonus, so 2 in this case, and you're trying to beat the defense of the opponent. The opponent will roll 2d6s and add their defense bonus. If your attack roll modified by your attack plus possible other modifiers is higher than the roll of the defender, roll plus the defense, then you score a hit. It's as simple as that. There is only one variant, magic attack, as indicated by the M here, which is kind of interesting because that means the witch and wizards do not have magic attacks. They have a normal attack of 1. But if you have a magic attack, instead of rolling 2d6s, you roll a d20, and the opponent doesn't get to add their defense. They still get to roll 2d6s in defense, but they don't get to add their standard defense value. Which also means, basically, if you look, now you know how the combat works, the defense and attack values of most units are 2 or 3. Here's 2 and 2, 3 or 2, 2 or 3, 2 or 1. They're pretty much within that range, which means that in most cases, well, it won't be like 50%, but when you roll, there will be maybe, the attacker will have a total of +1 or -1. You'll still be within the center of the probability bell. Will still mean that most rolls will feel pretty randomly, will feel, alas, that although you have these modifiers, ultimately combat so many times comes down to, well, why don't we roll 2d6s and see who rolls the most, the highest number, because that really is what most encounters seem to boil down to.
No. Nope. Nope. Not a game for me. The art, I had to address it, is just below the level of professionally produced games that we have these days. The art on the cover is just unappealing, and a lot of the art in the rulebook is exactly the same. Now, interesting enough, some of the cards and some of the other art is of much better quality, I find. So I don't know what happened. Did they run out of money when the good artists left and then they had to deal with whatever they had? They started with this kind of art. They're like, oh no, we need to hire somebody. I don't know. I don't want to sound cruel, because ultimately if the art is kind of subpar but the game is great, I can deal with that abundantly. But the problem is the game is railroaded when it comes to what the map dictates. You can ignore the map, but then you're going to lose. So there are just certain things that will be obvious. And on the other hand, total, complete, massive randomness, which really is hard to mitigate with strategy. Starting with the random composition of the armies. I like the idea a lot. I like the idea of roguelike armies. But frankly, by the way, we could just have a simple flat cardboard tokens, and we roll on a random table, and then we use whatever cardboard tokens have been determined there. The advantage would be that the cardboard tokens are easily readable, so even across the board. What is that symbol again? Oh, okay, I can see across the board what that is, and I would have the numbers there. Right there. So I don't have to be distracted all the time by, okay, that game piece, I want it to attack the game piece. What is it, that one? Okay, but what attack does it have? What defense does it have? Maybe I'll do this one, but what is the defense of this one? So you're constantly switching from the board and your card, the board and your card. Even if you know the game well, I don't know if you remember, that unit has 4 or 5 or 3 or 2. You're going to have to check that a lot, and that is just distracting. And again, when some of the symbols kind of look like one another, is also a little bit annoying. And after you're done with that, again, the problem is that you have 50-60% of chances of hitting one turn or failing the other turn. And so it just feels incredibly, massively random. You're moving around, checking the cards of a lot of these characters constantly. To then get to odds that are not all that exciting, nor does the game really give you ways of optimizing your strategy. I'm a war gamer. I'm okay with randomness being part of the game, but there should be a situation in which optimal strategy will considerably increase my chances of succeeding. It should be like a really odd situation if I fail. I always want to have that possibility as a wargamer. But if even optimal strategy gives me not that great odds, and then I really feel that I'm at the mercy of Lady Luck, well, that is annoying. On top of that, the game really takes a while to play. Here it says 45 minutes. I don't know how that could be possible. I think in a game I spent 45 minutes just double checking that that I had the right symbol corresponding to the right card and getting a sense of what the characters could do and how they interacted. Also, again, random deployment, random generation of the armies also means that some armies are stronger because the characters are not all the same. When it comes to the special abilities that they have, some characters have like a permanent ability which you can use pretty much a lot of time, every turn or a lot of times, and other ones that are incredibly or considerably situational, so you're gonna use them only from time to time. Well, guess what? The characters that have advantages that are always on are much stronger. There is a decided advantage for the defender, and so that doesn't give you a lot of incentives to be the attacker, but then you have to attack. And so in a certain sense, to win you had to play suboptimally. Do I only have bad things to say about this game? The dice that don't really look like dice, those unusual polyhedrons, are really pretty. And that's pretty much the extent of all the good things that I have to say about this game, unfortunately. You may have gotten a sense by now that I didn't enjoy it all that much. I just don't see what the perfect audience would be here, because you have a really high learning curve, not because of the rules, but because of the unique game effects. You have a production that looks pretty, but actually makes cumbersome to connect game pieces to what they can do. And ultimately, you don't have a lot more control than you have when you're playing a light dice game like, I don't know, Zombie Dice, maybe even Yahtzee, just because there's so much randomness at all levels of the game. So it is complicated, like certain, I wouldn't say, like a medium light war game, but it has a strategy of an immensely light, simple dice game. So this is my assessment of Dice War. I just did not enjoy it. I hope, well, maybe there is an audience out there that I can't begin to imagine. I cannot begin to imagine what their composition would be. If you belong to that audience, great. I'm glad then that my review will be negative for me. Maybe showed you a game you didn't know and it's just perfect for you. You love to learn about a lot of game effects, and then to have so much randomness that pretty much nullifies the game effects. Hey, to each their own. Dice Wars is not just a game for me.